And what can happen was when that land, there's so much pressure, when that land suddenly breaks or moves, it's going to create a wave of water. And I'm not talking about just little bitty rippling waves. It's a massive wave of water, and it can go rushing towards the shore, and eventually it's going to rush on the shorelines, and it can cause a lot of damage because it's just so much water. All right, let's continue reading about that tsunami. So tsunami terror. So everything under this section is going to tell you more about a tsunami. When an earthquake occurs under the ocean, it often moves a substantial amount of water above it. This creates a fast-moving wave called a tsunami. Out at sea, the wave may be only a few feet high. As it reaches shore, however, the wave can tower into a monster. It can hurl water for miles inland. Tsunamis can travel thousands of miles. In 1960, Earth's largest recorded earthquake struck the country of Chile. It produced tsunami waves up to 82 feet high along the coast. The tsunami also raced across the Pacific Ocean at a speed of more than 150 miles per hour. It struck the shorelines of Hawaii, Japan, Alaska, and other places. Hundreds of people drowned. Tsunamis. This is massive. 82 feet high, moving at 150 miles per hour. That's something you don't want to be in the way of when it comes up on shore. And look at this picture up here. It's just completely moved and stacked up all of the boats and things that should have been out in the ocean, but now are on land. The 2011 Japan earthquake produced tsunami waves more than 30 feet, 10 meters high. The 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake in southern Asia produced 50-foot, 15-meter tsunamis. These tsunamis engulfed entire cities and shorelines. The waves swept away buildings, cars, and people. Japan, southern Asia, and Chile had experienced many powerful earthquakes and tsunamis before. Why were so many people unprepared? You know, if these countries had experienced powerful earthquakes and tsunamis before, then why were so many people unprepared? You know, if it had been happening before, why were you not prepared for the next one? Let's continue reading and see. This is called predicting earthquakes. So everything in here is going to tell about how they can or cannot predict earthquakes. Seismologists are very good at measuring earthquakes. However, they still can't predict when earthquakes will happen. Remember, they're good at measuring, you know, the magnitude scale. They might go back and say, because of the damage and stuff, oh, it was a 5.0 or it was a 9.0. However, they can't predict. They can't tell you when one is going to happen. There was a time, Dr. Cifuentes explains, when I think scientists felt that predicting earthquakes was just around the corner, that we were going to be able to predict earthquakes very soon. But it's clear now that it's not around the corner. In fact, some have given up entirely on predicting earthquakes. One reason that earthquakes are unpredictable is that scientists cannot collect enough information to understand where and when an earthquake might happen next. Although scientists have placed special instruments in many earthquake zones, earthquakes still surprise us. Scientists, for example, had believed the next big earthquake in Japan would happen farther to the south, closer to Tokyo. Instead, it struck farther north. Okay? It's hard to predict an earthquake. We don't exactly know when they're going to happen. We don't exactly know how these plates are moving, every day, and when one is going to bump into another or slip under a plate. And so they're very hard to predict. I'm gonna stop right here and let you think. Do you think people will ever be able to get enough science to be able to predict earthquakes? Do you think one day that we might be able to predict earthquakes? You know, I'm not sure the answer to that question. It would be nice if we could predict earthquakes so people would know. But right now, we just don't have the science or the technology and stuff to be able to predict earthquakes. And so maybe one of these days, into the future, you never know. Somebody might be able to invent something to where they can predict an earthquake. But just because we don't know when they're going to happen doesn't mean we can't plan for them. Even though we can't predict earthquakes, we can prepare for them. Many seismologists help make information available to people so they can plan for and respond to earthquakes. This is especially important near coastal areas. Once the shaking goes on for more than 30 seconds, Dr. Cifuentes says, it's pretty simple. You have to run away from the ocean and run uphill. you have maybe 15 or 20 minutes to reach higher ground. How cities are built also affects how many people survive an earthquake. Cities in many countries have special building laws. Buildings must be strong and flexible. That way, they won't collapse during an earthquake. In some countries, however, buildings are often poorly built. The 2010 Haiti earthquake, for example, killed between 46,000 and 316,000 people. Unlike the earthquake in Japan, many of these people were killed by collapsing buildings and falling debris. However, earthquakes don't just destroy, they also create. They help make the mountains, coast, and other landscapes we see around us. Dr. Cifuentes explains. This is worth remembering as we learn how to predict and survive earthquakes in the future. So, and of course, for disasters, we can, whether it's an earthquake, a hurricane, a tornado, whatever, we can have emergency kits and things in our house, in our homes, and things that we can keep in case of an emergency. But think about it too. People are now starting to build their cities. If they're in earthquake zones, they're starting to try to build their cities, their buildings, and things stronger so that they don't fall down and collapse as much. Okay. Most of the time, people who are killed in earthquakes are killed when, collapsing buildings and things fall on them, or the debris from buildings, and things fall on them. So, if you live in an earthquake zone, you might want to make sure, that their buildings and things have been built to code. They are strong enough, hopefully, to withstand an earthquake, or at least maybe not collapse as much. Okay, so there are some things that people can do to help prepare. Now, let me stop and ask you this. What is one good thing? Yes, I said good. What is one good thing about an earthquake? According to what we just read on page 18, what is one good thing about earthquakes? Good. They can help create new forms of land. It says here they can help create mountains. They can create new coastlines. They can help create new landscapes that we see around us. They can change, yes, the shape of land, but think about it, they can create new land. When an earthquake happens, if it's strong enough, it might create a whole new mountain, okay? And so that is one good thing about an earthquake, is that it gives us new land to look at and to experience. So here's some things you can do if you're ever in an earthquake. If you were indoors, drop to the ground and crawl under a sturdy piece of furniture until the shaking stops. Stay away from glass, windows, outside doors, and walls, and anything that could fall, such as a hanging light or fan. Stay in bed if you are there when the earthquake strikes. Protect your head with a pillow. Only move from the bed if there is a heavy light or fan above you. Use a doorway or for shelter only if you know it is strongly supported. Stay inside until the shaking stops and it is safe to go outside. Do not use elevators. If you are outdoors, move away from buildings, streetlights, and utility wires. Avoid any space where there is falling debris, such as glass. Once in the open, stay there until the shaking stops. Whether you're indoors or outdoors, if you're indoors, you want to stay away from glass and things that could fall off shelves and cabinets. Try to get something under something sturdy. If you're at school, like in this picture here, you can get under a desk, you can stand in a doorway. If you're outdoors, try to move away from buildings. Don't get near telephone poles and light poles and things like that and electrical wires because those could fall on you. Okay, so this page was just teaching you, things you can do to protect yourself while you're in an earthquake. So, all right. And of course, if you ever want to do any more research, you can always type in, on EPIC or, do some research on your own at home on earthquakes or tsunamis. To me, tsunamis are interesting to research just because they're such a rare phenomenon that can happen. So continue your work or your earthquakes.